And welcome to a now patented fail-safe edition of Ben's Junk. The show that always fails safely, but really should never fail at all. But that's another discussion, isn't it? So, here's what happened. The thing that I was going to cover, I won a used one on Fleabay, and it just never got shipped. It just kind of disappeared. And I was able to get a refund and all, but they still make these things. I won't say what it is, but I just went on Amazon and ordered a new one. And Amazon was fine, but the item was defective. And so as of my shooting this, the exchange process is still going on. So hopefully next time I do a Ben's Junk, it'll be on the intended item. But anyway, the fail-safe here is, I guess, to just dig through part of another one of my collections. So in this case, today we're going to dig through some of my audio cassettes. Now, of course, you think Oddity Archive and audio cassettes, and you're probably thinking more of the stuff I keep in this appropriately gaudy case. Kind of the archive's greatest hits in there. Some record rip-offs, the Halloween tapes, Jimmy Fifth, of course, Hired Stud Will Travel. But these have already had their moment in the sun on archive, so let's turn our focus to some of my more general listening habits. So this case, or whatever you want to call it, set of drawers, is what I always keep on top of my little IKEA shelf here, which you can see a little sliver of in the background here. And this thing is really wonky, and I own 3 of these, but this is cosmetically the best one, but functionally it's the worst. So if I find one that's in good shape and actually works better than this, I'll swap it out, but this is really just here so I don't look too awful. It doesn't look too trashy. But anyway, what I keep in here are mostly albums that I'm really familiar with. To the point where if they're well mastered, well manufactured and all, which most of these are, I will periodically use it as a reference tape, just to make sure my tape deck's working, or just to throw in a cassette for fun once in a while. Now, I do keep a few other sorts of tapes in here too, but mostly it's what I consider my reference tapes. But anyway, let's go ahead and dig through this. And I'm going to have to pull each drawer out because 1, the final tape always gets obscured, and 2, these are really wonky, and this drawer is especially bad, so this could be interesting. But we'll start here. And so right up front, we've got all 3 of the Philips DCC tapes, digital compact cassette tapes that I own. And I covered the DCC a couple years ago, and it needs repaired, the deck that I have, but the quote that I got for repair was really high, and I thought, because it's something I would rarely, if ever, use, I never went through with it. I couldn't justify the cost. But anyway, amongst these tapes here, we've got some of these tapes I've had since I was literally just a little kid. I guess we'll just start with that idea. So this has appeared on archive once, I know that. This copy of the Beach Boys Christmas album, which my parents got for me when I was like 4. And they even wrote my initials on there. I guess if I took it to school or something. I don't know. But a really, really cheap reissue, but I still will play it like every other Christmas just for the hell of it. And speaking of Christmas, I know it's not quite Thanksgiving yet, so it's kind of blasphemy for me to talk about this stuff. But I do keep 3 Christmas albums in here. And this one has a bit of sentimental value, and it's just about as old as the Beach Boys tape. Billboard's Greatest Christmas Hits, 1955 to present, present equaling 1983, I guess. And this was my mom's tape, but she bought this on CD in the late 90s, I think, and handed down the cassette to me. Now, I have my own copy of the CD too, but I've just held on to it, and it is a very good sounding tape. But this is a Rhino tape, which, Rhino used to be kind of the reissue label, but this is kind of, in a way, a rare misfire from Rhino because they always prided themselves on, original everything, original master tapes, best quality, but 2 of the 10 songs here are not original. So The Little Drummer Boy is a re-recording from only maybe 4 or 5 years after the actual hit version, but still not the original. And the really bad one to me, I mean, it's a good rendition, but it's not the right one. Please Come Home for Christmas, Charles Brown, one of my favorite Christmas tunes. And it's that song's from the late 50s, but the recording here is, I think, from sometime in the 72 to 75 range, so kind of a rare misfire from Rhino. And then just quickly, the third one is Freddy Fender's Christmas album, which I have on CD now as well. And although this one's pretty rare on CD, and it was released under a different name on CD, but I just got lucky and found it in a used record store for like $5. But this is the cassette I'd had from a thrift store bin for ever and ever. And since we're kind of talking holidays here, I'm going to be putting this out just before Thanksgiving. Alice's Restaurant, which I have on CD and vinyl as well, but this is my original copy. I got this from a Kmart cheapie bin when I was like 12, and they don't really do it so much anymore, but they used to play the title cut to this thing, which is the entire first side of the record, on the rock stations, usually classic rock stations, every Thanksgiving, like at noon and maybe again at 6 p.m., but I haven't heard it on the radio in a long time. And it just became my little tradition to play at least the title cut of this every Thanksgiving. And not that the rest of the album is bad. If anything, I think it's worth a listen, but it's not like the long rambling comic narrative that the title cut is. But it's one of those things I could get rid of, but I just don't have the heart. And if anything, I usually dig out my vinyl of this one on Thanksgiving. So, one of my favorite albums of all time, Pure Prairie League, Bustin' Out. And this cassette actually blows away the original RCA CD of this, which I think is still in print as of my making this. And the CD is just horrible. It has no bottom end at all, but this has a real nice balanced sound to it. So not only is an album I'm really, really, really familiar with, but it actually sounds good for a change. Most reissues of this thing sound horrible. Couple of Patsy Clines, the Commodores, which I've had since I was like 12, and some edits. They hadn't had all their hits quite yet when this came out, so there's no Night Shift on here or anything. But it was one that I kind of enjoyed quite a bit when I was younger. And I still do, of course, but I just have better options for it now. And I mostly just keep it because, if nothing else, Motown did a good job with this one. Okay, moving on to the next drawer. And hopefully I can get through this one a little quicker. But I never said this was going to be an efficient video. But anyway, some of these are just in here for the hell of it, like this Meatloaf album, Bad Outta Hell 2. And for whatever reason, I was just obsessed with this when it first came out in '93. And this is my second or third tape of it, not because I liked it that much, but because stupid young Benny boy kept screwing up his copy. He would accidentally step on it, spill something on it, whatever. And I wound up going through, I believe this is the final copy. It's the only one I've got left. But I also have the CD at this point, and honestly, the CD just sounds better. The album is hit and miss. What else here? Stuff that I enjoy. It's not really anything super special. Bob Seger. I guess I'll quickly look at this Blondie tape. Best of Blondie. Very common. And I'm not sure if the CD of this is still in print or not. But even if you have all the Blondie albums, it's, to me, still worth having because it's got some unique mixes to it. And I think one of the songs is an outright alternate take. And I prefer the version of Heart of Glass on here to the album cut. This is the one where it ends with a long instrumental bit. And as opposed to the album cut where they just take part of the break, a link between a verse and chorus, I believe, and they just loop it for 2 minutes and change. Redbone, Wovoka. I was just over the moon when I found this thing. Of course, Come and Get Your Love. But not too terribly long after I scored this, and this was still sealed, I found a CD in a used record store here, actually in South Dakota, and this was before I moved here. And I remember when I bought it, on my way out the door, the cashier was getting cursed out by the owner of this particular store because, what do you mean we had Redbone? You didn't tell me, and you only let him pay how much for it? I think I paid $8 for it, but that was kind of interesting. I think I've only been in that store once since then. A couple of Motels albums. Here's a rarity. Kate Bush on Stage. And yeah, I have owned 2 copies of this. I actually got them at the same time. For a long time back in beautiful downtown Aurora, I had my favorite thrift store, which was in a really bad part of town, but they always had like great music. I bought a ton of cassettes. They're really cheap, usually $0.25 a piece. And it's where all the old record stores that went out of business would dump their selection when, they would go under. So I would just scoop up tons of these and multiple copies in case one was bad. And this is one of those. But this is her live EP. And I'll try and take this off. And this is a Canadian issue, hence the French on it. And I've got the video equivalent of this, but I keep it in here. It actually sounds really, really good. Usually tapes from the late 70s don't sound all that great, but for 79, this sounds fantastic. Another Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. Tommy James, which I got at one of those outlet malls years ago. I got it super cheap there. The Bee Gees, which I bought at the same Kmart as the Arlo Guthrie tape earlier. 3 Warren Zevon tapes, which I got on the same day at Media Play in 2004. They were going out of business. And I don't know what the deal was with the tapes, but if they came from another store or what, but they had just cardboard boxes full of tapes, and they were letting them go, new of course, for 10 cents a piece. And I bought, I think, 3 dozen albums. I think I found that many out of there. So, $3.60 for 3 dozen tapes plus tax. Call it $4. But these are the 3 Zevon tapes that I pulled from there. And they're all from, they're consecutive. So 87, 89, and 91. I've got these all on CD now, but Sentimental Hygiene, Transverse City, and Mr. Bad Example. But at the time, good luck finding these on CD. Of course, you can get them now, but at the time. And you'll probably see at least one more tape from that haul in here. Okay, on to the last drawer, and this could be interesting. This is the truly bad drawer. There we go. Oh, there is one more Christmas thing in there. I guess I'll just cover that. NRBQ and their Christmas Wish EP, which it kind of frustrated me because the title cut of this is, I thought, a really good song, kind of almost power pop, and I was kind of expecting, I guess, more of the same, but I mean, this is NRBQ we're talking about. That's not how they operate. And I was kind of disappointed to find that there's, 8 cuts on here, and most of them are like a minute or less, and they tend to feel more like piss takes. So it's like one really great thing surrounded by, why is this here? And I'm sure some of their fans will just argue me to the death on that. But the title cut is wonderful. And I guess we could keep running with the holiday theme here. Count Floyd. The Joe Flaherty's character, one of his many characters on SCTV EP he put out, and I'm not sure if this was before or after the Bob and Doug McKenzie album, so I think it was after, but don't quote me on that. And whoever owned this before me must have really liked it, because it's not in very good shape, but it's just rare enough that I keep it in here. And it does have the Christmas tune, Reggae Christmas Eve in Transylvania. But if you've seen a Count Floyd sketch, you kind of know that they all run the same way, and this is no different. If anything, the Bob and Doug McKenzie album holds together a little better. A couple of sealed tapes here. The Raspberries, their greatest hits. I consider these presumptive good cassettes. If for whatever reason I need a new tape, want a new tape, I can do that. Bette Midler's first album, and as far as I'm concerned, her only good album, which is still sealed. Now, the Beach Boys Christmas tape I mentioned earlier doesn't have Dolby, it doesn't have anything, and that thing's from the late 80s or very early 90s. Well, we've got another kind of 80s issue here, the Byrds' Greatest Hits, and it is just as bare bones as the other, as that Beach Boys tape. But it actually sounds really, really good. I was pleasantly surprised with this. And I've owned 3 or 4 copies of this thing in various versions over the years. I have an LP of this that just sounds horrible. Even on my good direct drive turntable, good cartridge, properly aligned and all, it is still just pure sibilance. Let's see here. Old favorite, Nick Lowe. So we've got the US and UK versions, US and UK, of his first album after Brinsley Schwartz. And I have his second one in here, Labor of Lust, his only real hit here in America, Cruel to Be Kind. And this thing sounds horrendous, but I figured since I had these two in here, I consider them kind of a piece. I figured I would just kind of finish it since they're pretty similar, reasonably similar albums. And let's see here. Here's another Billboard thing. Top Rock and Roll Hits 1956. And this is all original, so they got this one right, which they usually did. But I bought this at Tower Records in '05, I think. They were closing out their cassettes once and for all. And I picked up a handful of them. And actually another one of those tapes is right here. This copy of Robert Johnson, King of the Delta Blues Singers. Super, super influential blues artist. And I have this on CD. I have this on one of those gold CDs, but it's one made by Sony. And, for something that's supposedly so audiophile, I think the cassette actually sounds a little better. The CD, that gold CD, is kind of unnaturally bright for stuff recorded in the 30s. And let's see what else. I picked this up here in town. Buffalo Springfield's Greatest Hits, and I just thought it was odd that a band that only made 3 albums would get a Greatest Hits, and there's nothing on here that isn't on the individual albums, but I've heard the individual albums enough that I can just kind of pick this out as a sampler. And I guess you can just take a quick look at the others there. But anyway, I have another little box of tapes I want to cover here, so I'm going to take a cut and I'll pick that up. there just aren't enough hours in the day for me to do everything I'd like to do. And here's a very good case in point. It seems like on a semi-regular basis, I find that album that I can't get on CD is super expensive on CD or whatever. And so I will get it on cassette, vinyl, 8-track, whatever, with the intention of transferring it. And I'm lucky to get maybe half a dozen per year actually finished. And so I have this box. This is my ostensibly for transfer box. And as you can see, it's pretty full. And I've got a whole bunch of records behind this box here, just kind of off in the back, that I'd like to transfer at some point. But anyway, I guess we'll just take a spin through this. But this has been sitting around for so many years that about half of these tapes there's no point in me doing it because they've been reissued or I finally found a CD copy or whatever. So right out of the gate here, these two Richard and Linda Thompson albums. As of my making this, there was a box set put out which contains all their albums. And I guess I'll probably just wind up getting that. I mean, I have transferred these, but I've had these for a good 15 years now. And I just didn't have a good tape deck, so I'd like to take another crack at it. And a lot of these I have transferred at some point, but I would just like to take another shot at it. So these two, I guess, are kind of out of the running at this point. And then Richard Thompson's only all-instrumental album, which has been reissued, I think, twice now since I've had this. I do have a transfer of this, but it's pretty poor. So let's see here. We've referenced Laura Branigan on Archive, and this is another one that I've had multiple copies of. But Hold Me, and the only album of hers, I think, that has not stayed in print. And I have since acquired a CD of this, but as you can see, I've notated this as being a good copy. And it was one that, up until I found the CD a couple years ago, I was going to take another shot at, but that's kind of outdated now. And this tape, even though this is my allegedly good copy, it doesn't sound all that great. I actually have two Jules Shearer albums here. I kind of snuck this one along. So we've got his first two. He's better known as a songwriter than a performer. But I just wanted to show this first one because this is a great example of a mishap on the manufacturer's part. So for whatever reason, this tape has no leader. This is rewound. And as far as side 2 goes here, it starts a couple seconds into the first song. You can get a real good tight rewind on this, and you're still missing the first 2 or 3 seconds of the first song. So I just thought I'd just pull that out just to mention that. And then this one was actually done correctly, and it's never been reissued at all. And I just haven't gotten around to this one. This is another one I've had for like 15 years. And have done at one point, but again, it's a pretty poor transfer. A couple more tapes from that 10 cents a tape haul, back in 04. I guess it's more than a few years. Mongrel and Seven. So early Seeger, stuff that Seeger, for whatever reason, doesn't want reissued. And I do have transfers of these, and they're actually pretty decent, but I was still going to take another crack at them just for the hell of it. But I don't know how long these things must have been sitting around. They do have barcodes on them, so we know they're no earlier than the early 80s, I would say, but yeah. 3 Greg Kihn albums, all of which I have done, but again, these are ones I've had kicking around for 15 years or so, and I just never got around to taking another shot at. Another Freddy Fender album, just because most of his stuff hasn't made it to CD, or if it has, it's been only briefly. So this one's just never happened. And for as much as I love Nick Lowe and Rockpile and Elvis Costello, I have never gotten around to transferring this one. I guess I'm just kind of hoping deep down I find a CD of it. It has been on CD. This one's been referenced on Archive, the soundtrack to Back to the Beach. I just want to take a better shot at that one. This is actually pretty rare. The Bangles debut EP. Still sealed, but I've had this kicking around for so long that this has finally found its way to CD, so this is just kind of a moot point now. And I've referenced Mouth and McNeil on Archive before, but interesting story. That favorite record store, I mentioned that they would have sometimes multiple copies. So this is where I got really aggressive, and I actually have 4 copies of this. This is only 3 of them. But I just decided to pick them all up just in case something went wrong, and this was, of the ones I opened, the best. But it needs redone, and I don't think this has ever made it to CD, certainly not in its original configuration. Let's see, sealed Steve Forbert album, which I now have on CD. And this Little Stevie Orbit album, which has since been reissued, so that's pointless. Tubes, the Tubes Completion Backward Principle, fairly famous album cover. But it needs repaired before I even transfer it. Another one from that 10-cent haul. I just never opened this one, but this has been reissued since then, and I have the reissue now, so that's pointless. Found this Nicolette Larson album in a used record store bin on CD, so don't need to do that one now. Katrina and the Waves. Their first couple albums were on this little Canadian label, Attic. And they redid kind of the best of their first 2 for their first album for Capitol, which is where the hit version of Walking on Sunshine came from. But I picked this up anyway because I already had the first 2 albums, but there's half the songs on here are not on those first 2 albums. So I'm not sure where they're sourced from, but I've never gotten around to it. And this thing is, of course, still sealed as well. Doobie Brothers 2 for... I partially picked this up just because it's one of those old kind of cigarette case style packages. I already have this, Taking It to the Streets on CD, but not Living on the Fault Line. This one needs reissued. I don't know why this has never been reissued. Peter Wolf, Jay Giles Band, Lights Out. And this is his solo debut, and I've had this sitting around for about 10 years now, and I've just never gotten around to transferring it. And just cherry picking a few from the bottom here. Another duplicate. Kim Carnes, Barking at Airplanes. This one's still sealed. And this has been reissued since I got these, but it's one of those... there's a label called Culture Factory, which I absolutely hate. I've had a couple of their CDs now, and they are the most over-compressed, over-EQ'd, just all-around overdone things I've ever heard. So the cassettes absolutely pound the CDs, and that just should not be. Let's see, for our friends in Pittsburgh, Donnie Iris. And I always botch her name, even though the pronunciation is on here. I always call her Lena Lovic, and I know that's not right, or Lena Lovich. I always botch it. This one's still sealed. This is kind of an odd one. Andy Gibb. He only made 3 albums. I've got all of them in some way, shape, or form. Actually, the other 2 are on CD now. I've since found CDs, but this is the only one that's still stuck in a truly analog medium. Rocky Burnett, his second album. This is not the one with Tired of Towing the Line. This is this needs baked, is what it needs. This is kind of sticky. Let's see, for our Canadian friends, Frank Mills, for our Genesis Geeks, one of Mike Rutherford's solo albums, and I have this one on vinyl as well. His solo stuff doesn't really do a lot for me, but it's just, rare enough that I pick it up. I just had to pick this up because it seems like such a strange exercise. Music for 3 of D.W. Griffith's movies. Silent filmmaker for the most part, and still kind of controversial for a certain movie. And I didn't think there were scores written or compiled for those movies. I've never really researched it, but I just had to pick this up to hear it. And if you didn't tell me this was the soundtrack, or at least partial soundtracks for these movies, I'd have never known it. Got some 80s cheese goodness here. I think this might be Eric Carmen's most recent album, come to think of it. I think he's only done singles. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. One of my favorite 80s tunes, Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About You. But I've got that one particular song from the Streets of Fire soundtrack, so I've never gotten around to this. Rockwell. And me being a big Harry Nilsson geek, I had to get the Popeye soundtrack. Never transferred it, and I've seen this version of Popeye, the Robin Williams, Shelley Duvall version, and you can't convince me that they weren't on some serious drugs making that. I was going to send this off to the Cinema Snob at one point, because this kind of used to be his theme song, but I just never did. One of the great cult bands, the sensational Alex Harvey Band, Still Sealed. And then some stuff more stuff I've transferred. Sam Kinnison's first album that I need a redo. Another Christmas album, Warner Brothers Country Christmas, and there's a weird glitch on this thing, a very digital sounding glitch. I think it's inherent to the tape, but I just haven't had a chance to investigate it again. And then some of these, we're talking manufacturing defects. Moon Martin, who unfortunately passed away fairly recently, Escape from Domination. And, this thing has some terrible crosstalk to it. Capitol was just asleep at the wheel on this one. Here's a true oddity. 5 minutes before Billy Joel became Billy Joel, he was one half of Attila, sometimes referred to as the worst rock record ever made. And I would argue that fiercely. I've heard infinitely worse than this thing. If anything, I think parts of it hold together pretty well. Some novelty music that I just never opened. Apollo 100, Joy. The synth-driven rendition of Jesu, The Joy of Man's Desiring, which you normally hear around the holidays. A lot of holiday references today. The Roaches, I've already got their first one on vinyl and CD, but just haven't gotten around to taking care of that one. And I guess more Cinema Snob territory here. Shock Treatment. And I had to pick this up on cassette when I found it in the thrift store bin. This was the first thing I ever owned on vinyl. The soundtrack to Two of a Kind, John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John, and yeah, I never got around to taking the sticker off. And there's some decent cuts on here. It's not really anything I've listened to with any regularity. There's a song from Journey on here that I have pulled from Journey's Greatest Hits album. But, yeah, I do need to transfer this one. My old LP of this was where my younger, cuter version of myself did all the stupid things that kids do with records. Play it backwards, make the comedy scratch noises and all that. So, yeah. Just one of the many, many things I need to get around to. But anyway, I think that's enough for now. I'll be going on way too long otherwise. So I'm just going to wrap it up here. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed just this little informal stroll through another one of Benny Boy's quirks. I'll talk to you again soon.